All right, real quick, we still have hoodies and t-shirts available in all sizes. Real nice quality stuff. We got Coon Creek Outdoors logo on the front, as well as a nice big logo on the back. You can get them at Hoosier Trapper Supply. It'll be the first link in the description. A great way to support the channel. All right, y'all, welcome back to another one. So today's video topic is actually a question that one of y'all had. I get a lot of questions on how I come up with video topics, and honestly, it's you. Subscribers, they ask questions. I read all the comments, and there's a lot of questions in there. So today we are going to talk about long chains versus short chains, and then when to use them. I think this is pretty important, really. And you know, I've been doing this a long time, and I can honestly say I've tried them all different ways. So I wanted to kind of share with you my experience with long chains, you know, versus the short chains, and kind of the applications, because I think that's actually more important is the application of when to use them. So if you don't know what we're talking about here is our anchoring chain for our trap, basically. So I've got two styles here for you. Now I'll be frank with y'all. My preferred method is a short chain with an earth anchor, particularly a fin super stake. But that's not to say that, you know, it's the right way. It's just my preferred way that I've tried over the years. So this is kind of my preferred setup. This is a Duke 650 here with a chained finned super stake. Okay, so whenever we're talking chain length, that is essentially, you know, how much chain we have sticking out of the ground. So in this instance here, I have about 8 to 9 inches of chain. This is almost what the stock 650s come from, and I've kind of went to that for everything. All my old number 4s and number 3s and everything else. I run a short chain. Obviously, you know, you can see the chain of the super stake, but I drive that earth anchor down into the ground to that swivel. So I've got that much chain sticking out. So on the opposite end of the spectrum, we have a long chain setup. Just like it says, this is one of my old long chain setups here. And this is almost 4 feet of chain from basically trap base to where we're gonna anchor. Now, you'll notice there is no earth anchor on this thing. And the reason is, with these long chains, the way I anchor this is actually with rebar. So in my mind, that's kind of what dictates chain length is your anchoring system. And I want to give you a few examples of why. So anyway, we'll start off with what I used and what a lot of people start off with, which is, you know, whenever you first get into trapping, the easiest thing, I'm not even sure earth anchors were a thing whenever I started trapping, but like, you know, you read old magazines, it was you anchored everything with rebar. And so that's what I started using. So this is number 4 or 1/2 inch rebar. These are 2-foot stakes with a washer weld on top of them. These are ones I made so long ago. But anyway, the reason they're 2-foot is because in my area around here, 18-inch wasn't enough. So I ended up going 2-foot, like you said. And whenever I start off trapping, a lot of guys will just take and drive this piece of rebar right through the swivel, and you'll anchor that. Okay, a couple of problems with that, especially whenever we're talking canines. Not so much with your smaller critters, but whenever you start bumping up into those larger predators, canines, you know, your kind of heavier critters, a lot of times that anchoring system, I'm not saying it doesn't work, but you're more apt to have it fail or have problems with it. So problem with anchoring with one stake, if you will, one rebar stake, and short chaining, basically to the stock chain into the swivel, what will happen, and if you trap enough, this will happen to you. What will happen is you've got that trap anchored in the ground, you catch a larger predator like a coyote, and what'll happen is on a front foot catch, a coyote will actually be able to stand up on his back legs, and he will actually be able to pull vertical on that anchor. Okay, so these things, obviously, a rebar stake in the ground is, you know, especially something like this that's 2 foot in the ground, it takes an immense amount of force to pull it side to side. okay? So generally speaking, your critters will not be able to pull that anchor out because they can't get any lift on it. They're just pulling straight on or just a few inches off the ground. A coyote, on the other hand, is a larger critter. If he can get some upward momentum, it's fairly easy to pull these rebar stakes straight up and out. Like I said, much more difficult to pull them sideways, but whenever you get right over top of them, they come out pretty easy even in hard ground. So that is the reason that I went to long chains for my rebar sets. You can see here, a coyote, that's all he's got to do, stand up on his back legs. And I've seen it happen. I mean, I've had it happen where a coyote will pump a stake out of the ground because they'll stand on their back legs, okay? So to remedy that, we use long chains, okay? And to remedy that even further, a lot of times with rebar, we'll run a dual stake system. So this is a homemade one. This is just a couple washers with holes drilled in it and some homemade J-hooks. But basically what you gain by having dual stakes is you're able to take and you're able to cross stake rebar like that, okay? So this is much more difficult to pull out of the ground because it's harder to pull two stakes that are cross staked vertically as opposed to one, right? So you're helping yourself out there. But the biggest thing is by long chaining here, that coyote is not now able to stand up on his back legs and pump that stake out of the ground. Okay, that's the reason for long chaining. So this is my old long chain setup here. Like I said, this is almost 4 feet of chain. A lot of guys have their preference. You know, a lot of guys say, oh, 2 foot's enough, 3 foot's enough, whatever. You know, personal preference is a lot on that, but that's what long chaining does for you. And you can see here on this section of long chain here, I've got, you know, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, like 8 swiveling points on this. Because what happens with a long chain setup is now you're able to let that critter run around a lot more. So if you're in an area with grass and different things like that, you're a lot more apt to get tangles. And as we all know, swiveling is, in my opinion, the most important thing to keep from foot damage. As long as that trap can move around, that critter's foot is just restrained there. So, you know, running these long chains, you run a lot of swivels. One other thing that a lot of guys do is they run shock springs. Okay, so here is a big difference between a short chain and a long chain. So by using this setup here with the earth anchor and the short chain, obviously this earth anchor holds, I mean, I've pulled out my side-by-side with this, with a couple of these, right? Like this holds awesome. So we don't have to worry about that coyote pumping that stake up out of the ground. Okay, so we can use a short chain. Now, talking about the shock springs, here's kind of where a little bit of a difference comes to. So basically, if you've got 4 foot of chain here and that critter is staked hard right here, that means that coyote can now, he's got a lot of area to run and move. And this is kind of where I go back to, I prefer this short chain. And I'll give you a couple of examples. So first things first, you know, as much as we all try to do it, we're not going to make perfect catches on canines every time. You know, I like to think I will, but I just don't. So by having a short chain trap, if I were to get a toe caught critter or not that super deep pad catch that I want, this short chain doesn't allow that critter to get a huge lunging run at it, okay? Contrast here with this long chain setup, you know, that critter, he can get a running start. So if you've got a critter that's toe caught or not the best to catch, and he can get 3-4 steps and then hit that trap hard, there's a very good chance that he can just pull right out of the trap. Because I mean, as we all know, these are just restraining devices, right? They're not held forever in them. They're just restraining devices. So if that canine or that coyote can get a hard run at that, he can pull right out of that trap. It's just not that difficult. So to mitigate a lot of that, a lot of guys will use inline shock springs to take some of that shock out as that coyote lunges. Like I said, I personally run this. I don't have a shock spring here to show you, but you can look them up. but that's a great option for long chaining. I personally don't use drags. The area that I trap is just so open. I want them staked hard. But you know, if you're running drags, that is a great, almost I would think a necessity for running drags to have inline shock springs. Just to where when it's that animal does get tangled up, he can't lunge, you know, because he's hard then. It's almost like he's hard staked once they get tangled up. So something to consider whenever you're doing that. So a couple other things to consider when using these long chains versus short chains is just the kind of the comfort of the animal, right? Coyotes, obviously, they're gonna fight a trap hard. And with these short chains, they're just not able to get that running start. And personally, you know, I think it kind of helps that critter not having to damage their shoulder or their arm area, you know, just by not having that lunge. And this is just stuff that I've seen over the years from skinning. You know, if you got an animal that's been in a long chain for a while, sometimes they'll have bruising around his shoulder. So I mean, we're always looking out for the comfort of the animal too. So things to consider on that side of it. So as far as the short chain setup here, this is my short chain setup. I still have 4 swiveling points in this because, you know, if I do a lot of hay sets, right? So if you're still tangled in, you know, got tall grass or whatnot, even with this short chain, you still need a lot of swiveling points, right? So like I said at the beginning of the video, there is definitely not a right way or wrong way to do this. A lot of it is, you know, kind of situational or what you have confidence in. Quite frankly, I've got a buddy, Cody of mine, he traps in a very similar type terrain that I do, and he uses rebar, okay? We both catch coyotes, so it's just whatever you have confidence in, and kind of, to me, the biggest benefit by using these earth anchors in this short chain is I do a lot of step down dirt hole sets, okay? So to me, when I do those step down sets, all I have to do is dig a trap bed big enough to bury that, you know, 7, 8, 9 inches of chain. That's it. That's all I have to bury, and I'm good to go, right? As opposed to, you know, if I'm long chaining here and I don't want that anchor outside of the hole, I've got to dig a big enough trap bed to sink down all these rebar tops, all this swiveling. I've got to dig a hole big enough to have all that length of chain, and ideally, if you were running that, a shock spring too. So to me, I can be a little bit more efficient by running these short chains. I can dig a smaller trap bed whenever it gets cold. I use a lot less waxed dirt. So, I mean, there are definitely advantages to each. If you're in rocky, super rocky terrain, you may not be able to use this method, you know, this earth anchor method. You may have to use rebar. So, you know, it just kind of goes with the country that you're trapping in. But like I said, I think the biggest thing is having those swivel points all throughout. I really believe in that. One other thing to consider is I use a lot of dirt holes. That's kind of my go-to, is some sort of a dirt hole, whether it be a step down, a standard dirt hole, a trench set, some sort of variation. In my opinion, especially whenever we're talking remakes, by having this short chain, basically you could see here on a step down dirt hole set, that is honestly, you know, half the depth of the hole that I'm already digging, right? So whenever I make that catch on that canine, because he's staked hard right there, he can only move in that manner. And for the most part, whenever you come back to that catch to make that remake, all you have to do is just clean out the dirt hole, and basically clean out the little bit of loose soil that this chain kind of loosened up, and your trap bed is pretty much intact. I find a lot of times it's easier to do my remakes and my sets by having these short chains as opposed to this long chain where that critter can get all the way around and really tear up the area because he's got so much area to move, right? As opposed to, you know, this, a lot of times, like I said, I come back and I take out a little bit of loose material and I bed that trap right back in that hole. So to me, that does mean quite a little bit. Those of you guys that have followed me for years, you know I am all about efficiency. So just a few things here to consider whenever you're choosing your chain and anchoring system. Like I said, I kind of want to focus this towards more, you know, canine, like coyote trapping. Like I said, we can go into other details on your small game. As you guys know, I use fence staples and I use my Signature Series cable anchor for all the small game stuff. Just a total different class there. But whenever we're talking canines and these anchoring systems here, like I said, these are kind of the two predominant ones in the industry, if you want to call it that. The earth anchor system and the long chain with the rebar. So anyway, I'm gonna leave you all with that. Don't forget, tag me on Instagram, Facebook, if you guys would like to have your catch photo or barn shot in the end of the video. I'll leave you all with that. As always, appreciate the view. We'll see you on the next one.